think some fought on Ethereum, but it's also sort of an existential question for me. And I think for a lot of crypto natives who've been here for many years, a lot of the OGs, is just what if the next cohorts that come into crypto don't give a damn about decentralization? Like, what if they don't care? Okay. And so here's the Bitcoin network, of course, like optimizing for decentralization, the ability to run your own node. And I think Ethereum has followed down that path with a different set of trade-offs, but it's very important that stakers and validators, and Mike, you were just saying how important of an export the validators and stakers of Ethereum could be for the world. As Ethereum has made some choices, some trade-offs in order to allow individual stakers to kind of run their validators from home, decentralization, right? We talk a lot about OFAC, and like Anthony, you brought that into the picture. Is Ethereum letting like non-OFAC transactions through? So this notion of decentralization. But what if the future cohorts don't care about the cypherpunk values that we care about? Well, like, then is Ethereum over designed? Is it over optimized? Right? It's like,
what if World War III never happens?
Sure, exactly. What if it's just peacetime? I mean, a lot of alternative high TPS chains make fantastic peacetime chains, and if you could just like restart it in like a Discord with all of your validators there, it's like it's just fantastic. What if we don't need these features of decentralization? And what's more, what if future cohorts don't really care? Do you really need it to create your meme coins and your casinos and your USDC? It's in a bank account anyway. It's not freaking decentralized. Maybe we'll start with you, Anthony.
Yeah. I mean, I have my own interpretation of this, and I think it's like a pretty good response, but I'd love to hear what other people say. It's a short response, but this has been something that people have asked for many, many years now, right? Within crypto. Like, this is always the number one question that I see people ask once they're deep in crypto. And it's like, why would anyone care about this stuff? It's so deep. It takes so long to learn any of this stuff. And like, we see people just go to centralized things anyway. Everyone went to Terra, everyone went to Celsius and BlockFi and all these things. But I will say that I usually kind of think of decentralization as security. There's a reason why the top 2 nation states in the world spend a shit ton of money on their security, right? Because they know that you don't do that because you expect there to always be, even if you expect there to always be peacetime, you do that because you know that there's not always going to be peacetime, and you don't want to take the risk of being the one with the smaller stick when the shit hits the fan, right? So if you think of it that way, if you think of decentralization as security, you basically design these systems in the people who design them are the people who care about this, right? You design these systems in such a way that, yes, no one else has to care about it, and everyone else can criticize it. They can say that you're doing the wrong thing, whatever. People criticize the US military budget all the time, right? For example. But then when shit hits the fan, you start thinking, oh, I'm glad that we spent so much money on the military to defend ourselves against these aggressors, right? And the same is true for Ethereum, and the same is true for blockchains generally. So you're going to be glad that you have decentralization when shit hits the fan, and you're going to take it for granted when it's peacetime.
Jordi, what's your take? What if people don't care about decentralization?
I think, first of all, like, some apps don't need decentralization, but they can still use Ethereum because they want the user experience of, I'm already on the wallet. I already have my money here. There's liquidity here. Like, it's already there. Yes, I'm paying a little bit more for security than like if I didn't do that, but I'm getting so much more. So it still has that like network effect. And so even for those use cases, it can still make sense, right? Yes, a lot of things, sweat coin, whatever, like walking around, getting points, like maybe that doesn't need a huge amount of like security budget, but it can still be built, on Ethereum for all the other reasons mentioned. So I think that's fine. I think ultimately, like, some L2s will be, maybe more centralized, and you're trusting somebody, like an Amazon or whatever, but they're providing a service and you're using it for that case. And as the base money kind of, I shouldn't have said base money, as a sort of money, community money, in my opinion, it can still kind of use that decentralization. And, geopolitically, we are going to see escalations again, like, China, US, everything else. It's not going to suddenly go away. And having a neutrality of a technology, I think, is going to be very valuable. Now, I think Bitcoin is further along on that, just to be clear. And I do like Bitcoin for that reason of the neutrality of it. I think Ethereum is still kind of working its way towards that You mentioned OFAC. Yeah, like a lot of founders will just shut down their front ends or their apps or whatever because they don't want to go to jail. We saw Tornado Cash. We've seen things happen. So, you know, people caring or not caring about decentralization is less the boogeyman, in my opinion.
Mike, what's your take on this? What if the market just doesn't value decentralization in the way that the first decade of crypto OGs have really valued it, and they allocate somewhere else?
Yeah, I think that there are sort of two reasons to care about decentralization, and one, which has been the first decade of crypto, has been from an ideological standpoint. There is a relatively smaller group of people in the world who like just deeply care about this idea of decentralization and things being fair. And I think what we're about to move into is the bad news is I don't think that's everyone. I think the new entrants of crypto are going to care less from an ideological standpoint, but the market will value decentralization. And I think that's the important thing to understand. The success of this industry of Ethereum doesn't rely on a small group of ideologues. Decentralization has a value, a market value, which is credible neutrality, in my opinion. And there are just certain things that you could build on blockchain substrates that simply would not make sense in a Web 2 context. And I feel like the first 14 years, because there are so many frictions associated with building on decentralized rails, has been all about kind of the downsides. Oh, it's not as efficient. Oh, it's not as cost effective. But it does one thing so much better than anything that's come before it, which is this idea of being credibly neutral. And if you look at something like Lido as an example of this, which I know there's been a lot of controversy around, but something like 80% of Lido's resources goes towards decentralizing themselves. Why are they doing that? Because it's an ideologically driven group that they just care about decentralization, so they're allocating 80% of company resources? No, they have a market reason to do that, because the flatter they are, the more decentralized they are, the larger ultimately their total addressable market is going to be. So what I would say to you, Ryan, is the bad news is like, right, every niche industry kind of starts like this, ideologically driven, et cetera. Crypto probably gets less like that over time, but that doesn't matter. This technology doesn't depend on new ideologues coming in who care about decentralization. There will be market-driven forces. There will be things that are only possible to build on decentralized, credibly neutral substrates. And that should be really exciting for everyone.
I remember one thing I've heard you say before, Mike, that the number one rule of crypto is to survive. And it strikes me that things that are decentralized tend to survive longer and far past their centralized.
Centralization is a liability, right, for a lot of these kind of different.
I mean, we saw
projects,
it, right? What happened to Celsius? What happened to BlockFi? What happened to SBF, FTX? Right? Contrast that to DeFi. Contrast that to the Bitcoin network. Contrast that to Ethereum. They survived, but the counter is that takes a while for that to play out, because you have to go through these kind of like bad times and drastic events and cataclysms for decentralization to show its value.
Kind of going back to what Anthony was saying, which is that like you don't really need decentralization until shit hits the fan. Like in the modern day and age, living in an earthquake-proof building, working in an earthquake-proof building is a non-negotiable. Like this is built into the world that we live in. And anytime we have cities that aren't built with earthquake-proof buildings, eventually in the fullness of time, they all collapse. And this taps into, I think, what is a very big like ideological debate and a point of friction between many communities out there, because it's all about like future planning for unforeseen events. And that's very hard to debate in current times around, especially while some people are getting rich off of doggy coins, right? This is a philosophical debate. It's an ideological debate. And it's also a time frame debate. I think a lot of debates in crypto are just because we're using different time frames. Like when Anthony talks about like, oh, in the fullness of time, layer 2s will totally have all of their UX issues solved, so therefore I'm not going to bring up that subject. Well, then somebody who's in the near term is like, oh, well, I just used a layer 2 yesterday and the UX was broken. Like all of these are like time frame debates. And I think the reason why I'm here in crypto is that I understand that in the fullness of time, there will be an earthquake. There will be a shock to a global financial system built onto the internet. And if we're not building with those precautions in mind now, then that's actually not what motivates me to be in crypto in the first place. And I think that's why like I have found myself in the Ethereum world, because all core dev calls are like looking for all potential shocks rather than just trying to move fast and break things. And so I just want to add that one little note of flavor before we move on.
So I agree with all that, David, but I even think there's reason to be more optimistic than that. Like I think there are reasons today. I don't think we have to wait for something to go drastically wrong. Like there are like, so here's just a trade-off in between something like Ethereum and Solana. Ethereum has optimized quite a bit for solo staking, right? They've made the hardware requirements, bandwidth requirements very, very low to optimize for solo stakers. That's led to some downsides, higher fees on main chain ETH as opposed to something like Solana. But in something like Solana, what you also have to, it's more expensive and difficult to be a validator over there, right? So the advantage is you get quicker blocks, but you have slightly maybe more centralizing properties of the way that proof of stake works over there. So maybe there are applications that are built or rely ultimately on a network of solo stakers, and they'd rather pay for access to those validators. I think there's this ideological thing, but I also think there are more proximate market forces. And builders and entrepreneurs tend to be really pragmatic. They do the thing that makes the most sense for their solution. And I think like one of the things I'm excited for ETH in 2024, not to keep bringing this back up, but like restaking, like one of the challenges of Solana, if you look with Jito, an interesting inverse mirror of what's going on Ethereum versus Solana is there's a much higher stake rate in Solana, but a much lower penetration of liquid staking, probably because people don't view Solana as money-like as they do Ethereum. And consequentially, you've seen this much larger, richer liquid staking ecosystem grow within ETH, and you have restaking. And so I just don't think we have to wait for a World War II thing. I just think there are trade-offs in between these different blockchains that will make sense for different use cases. And there's like plenty of reason to be excited about the decentralized properties of Ethereum today. And it will make sense for some use cases over here and some use cases over there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can add one more thing to this before we move on, because I want to talk about the credible neutrality point that Mike brought up before. This is not a well understood term, I think, within crypto. You say this term and a lot of people don't understand it. The way I've been kind of talking about it lately, and it really is just something that I kind of came up with lately off the back of some conversations I was having, is basically that let's imagine a future where ETH is like a global money and people don't cash it out anymore. It's just money, right? People use ETH to buy things with, and you know, they don't care too much because it doesn't actually fluctuate too much in value. It's like a normal kind of money that we're used to. Now, let's imagine both the US government and the North Korean government store their wealth in ETH on Ethereum. That is a credible neutral network if they do that, because that network is not favoring either party, and either party has confidence that their network will not favor either of them, and either party doesn't have control over the network. So that's what we talk about when we talk about credible neutrality. Basically a completely neutral layer that anyone can use and have confidence in, that no other party, even their parties that they're, you know, basically enemies with at the nation state level, can take their wealth away or can control them or can manipulate them in some way. But it's broader than that, of course. And I think that if we talk about OFAC and stuff like that, I mean, Ethereum has already proven its censorship resistance, I think, even though a lot of the network censors the Tornado Cash transactions. It's just delayed inclusion, we call it, where essentially you wait like a couple minutes and your transaction's getting included anyway, because Ethereum is censorship-resistant network. It's not censorship-proof, neither is Bitcoin, mind you, because that's a lot harder to do, but I think Ethereum has already proven that out. So Ethereum has proven out the censorship resistance and the credible neutrality in my mind, but if we want to talk about it in its end state, that's how I kind of think about it.
To continue leveling up your crypto game, then you need to get on the Bankless newsletter. It's the world's most popular crypto email and is completely free. Just click below to sign up.